Hello everybody, it's Mr. Q again. What's up? Alright, today we're going to continue on with my travel series. This is part 2 of part 2. Remember, the cost video is a 2 parts in this second part. So cost is part 2 and there's 2 parts in cost. Today we're talking about the second part of the costs that are involved in traveling. Last time we talked about transportation and accommodation. And today we're going to talk about other things that you need to be thinking about when you travel. All right, so let's get into it. The next biggest and probably most important expense is my favorite expense. Can you guess what it is? That's right, food. Well, if you're going to be there for more than a few hours, you probably need to eat something, right? So you need money to pay for food. Like I said before in the last section, sometimes your hotel might have a free breakfast for you, but usually they don't have much more than that. Some hotels are special and they call that all-inclusive, and that means that they might have every meal provided to you, including drinks. And usually those types of hotels are resorts and they tend to be more expensive. So be careful of that. You don't necessarily need all your meals provided to you from the hotel, right? It's always great to get out into the city and try some local food. Go to some restaurant that you see a bunch of local people standing at and try some of the food from there. Because that's the food that the locals eating. That means that it's probably pretty good. If you go to a place where there seems to be a lot of foreigners, well, the food might be nice for foreigners, and that might be nice for you, but isn't it more interesting to try what other people are trying? That's what I think. So, when you think about food, obviously, most people try to have 3 meals a day, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you can budget for how much you think you may typically eat for each of those meals. So, for me, I usually budget about $10 for breakfast, maybe $15 for lunch, and maybe $20, $25 for dinner. Now, of course, I might skip a meal or something, and maybe a meal doesn't cost as much, or maybe a meal costs a little bit more, but that's okay. It's an average, right? So I generally average about $45 a day for food. Usually I round that up to 50, nice round number, right? So if you plan $50 a day for food per person, right? That's just me eating. That's not anybody I'm with. So if there's 2 of us, that'll be $100 a day. And hopefully, maybe it'll be less than that. And then you can use that money for something else. But food comes down to you, right? It's all very subjective. How much do you want to pay for your meal? How fancy do you want your meal to be? How much food do you need to make you feel full? Right? So you have to take all these things into consideration, and maybe you might like to eat at fancy restaurants all the time, which means $10 for breakfast is probably too low. $20, $25 for dinner is definitely way too low, right? So it's up to you. You have to decide how you like to eat, what you want to eat, when you eat, and then you can come up with a budget for your food.
This is a sample budget that I created for food. You can see at the bottom left the amount that I budgeted for food, and then on the bottom right you can see how much it actually cost.
Of course, there are some other expenses that you might want to consider when planning your budget for your trip. The first is, unless you only want to use Wi-Fi on your trip, you might want to consider getting a SIM card for your cell phone at the airport. Usually, the SIM cards at the airports are pretty inexpensive, and they have a nice plan for like a few days or a week, and there's no contract and there's no strings attached. Just use it however you need to use it, and then you can throw that SIM card away when you leave the country. No big deal. But if you want to be able to use your map application, if you want to make phone calls, if you want to use the internet without Wi-Fi, then this is something that you might want to consider and look for when you get to the airport at your destination.
You can see here some examples of SIM card stores located at the airport.
You also want to have a little extra money for your excursions, right? You've done research already about what to do when you get there. Maybe you want to go to Disneyland, right? But that's going to cost you like what? Anywhere between $50 and $100 a day. So you need to make sure you have that budget into your budget and make sure you have enough money to pay for those types of things. You know, not all excursions can be very expensive. Some can be very expensive, you know, but always do your research, know how much those things cost if you can, and then bring that money with you.
You can see this spreadsheet that shows you how much it might cost you to go to Disneyland for multiple days. Many amusement parks have discounts on their tickets if you go for more than one day. So they can also include tickets to other nearby parks. So look for deals when it comes to buying your tickets and see if you can get a multi-day ticket and if you can get a multi-park ticket, and you might be able to save some money. There are all kinds of tours and activities that you could participate in during your trip. Try to research in advance so you can budget money appropriately for these activities.
And finally, you might want to spend some money on souvenirs. Souvenirs are things that help you remember about your trip, just like pictures, right? Maybe you want to buy some beads, or you want to buy a statue or something. Those are souvenirs. Maybe you want to buy souvenirs for some of your friends and family to make them jealous that they didn't get to go on your trip with you, and show them some of the cool things that you got to see, right? So you'll need a little bit extra money for souvenirs. Maybe some of that money will come from you saving money from your food budget, but don't count on it, just in case, all right?
Many people like to buy refrigerator magnets or shot glasses or little statuettes about their trip.
Some countries don't have a lot of access to credit. So some countries, it's hard to use credit cards. And so you'll end up having to get the local currency from an ATM. You'll need to get cash, right? Paper money. So don't forget to get some at the airport maybe, because it can be, the airport generally has several different types of ATMs that will, hopefully one of those will be compatible with your ATM card from your home country. All right. And speaking of being aware of that, be aware of the local currency exchange rate. You know, different countries have different money, of course, but the value of their money may be different from what you are used to. So you could have, you know, your money, and then the country you're going to, maybe your money's not as good as their money. Like if you go to Europe, right, or England, oftentimes most countries' money is not as valuable as that money is. So you have to pay attention that if you're paying 15 pounds, that's not $15, right? That's more like $18. So there's an increase in how much you pay because of this exchange rate. Or you could go to a country where your money is stronger than their money, and so then you'll have extra money, right? So like if you go to Vietnam, you literally will have millions of their currency. And you feel like you're so rich because you have millions of their currency. But, you know, you still are going to have to spend your money to get that money. And it's, it seems like a lot of money, but in the end, it's not usually as much money because you're usually paying, if you pay this much money in your currency, you're going to spend that money in that currency. So don't get carried away. Just because their currency might be valued a little bit less doesn't mean that you're going to get off spending less. So you got to pay attention to that. But most countries, especially Western countries, do allow the use of credit cards. So it's very important to not just travel with cash, but to have multiple ways to pay for things in case one way doesn't work. Some places take credit, some places take cash. Have them both. That way you can use either. And, I try to put my money in different pockets. Don't put all my money and credit cards and stuff in the same spot. Because, it's possible that you could run into a criminal and they might steal some of your money. And if you keep it all in one place, you might lose everything. But if you keep it in different places, in bags and pockets and whatever, then there's a chance that maybe they don't take everything and you'll still have something left over. So, pay attention to your money. Pay attention to your surroundings so your money doesn't get stolen.
There are apps available that you can use to help you keep track of how much your money is worth compared to the local country's currency.
Let's review about what we covered today in the second part of my travel series, in which we discussed the cost of travel. Put these costs into a spreadsheet. Help yourself out to keep track of the categories and the expenses, right? If you're going to take a tour, that's cool, but you may still need some extra money on top of whatever the tour costs. If you're not taking a tour, then you need to be paying attention to your transportation. How do you get back and forth from the airport or to the train station or however you're going, right? Then you got to pay for how you're going. Are you taking a plane? Then you got to pay for getting around the city you get to, right? Don't forget to include baggage. Also, you should have already paid for your passport and visa in the last section, because you probably need to have a passport before you start traveling. You probably already have one. If you don't, of course, you need to pay for that. And many visas also cost money. So that may or may not need to get budgeted into the cost of your vacation, because you have to pay for it way before you start your vacation usually. But if it's a visa on arrival, you might need money once you get to the airport of your arrival destination. So then you'll need some cash there to pay for your visa maybe. You'll need to pay for your accommodation. Are you going to stay with friends and family? Good for you. It'll be free. Most of us don't have friends and family all over the world, so we have to pay for some place. And a cheap place to stay is a hostel. And the problem with a hostel is you might have to share a room, not a bed, but you'll have to share a room maybe, and you'll almost certainly have to share the bathroom with people. But if you want more privacy, if you want somewhere nicer, then stay at a hotel or resort. And, some resorts include your food. Some hostels will include a breakfast. But either way, you need to be thinking about what are the things that you need at your hotel to make you comfortable. Do you need a pool? Do you need the airport shuttle? Do you need a breakfast included? What do you need? And then you can budget for your accommodation. And of course your food, right? Make a budget, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe even throw in a little extra, like I do, I round it up, just in case I need to get a snack or something. right? I usually budget at about $50 a day for all my food expenses. And hopefully I skip a meal or a meal costs me less, and so that gives me some extra money for when I have a more expensive meal. And that's okay. And don't forget small minor expenses that you might be tempted to go without. But maybe it's not that much and it would be convenient to have a cell phone, so get a SIM card at the airport. You know, don't forget to buy some souvenirs maybe if you want some help remembering your trip. And of course you have to have money for your excursions, you know, park tickets or, you know, tour tickets. You can take, there are buses that go around many major cities and it's like a tour and you can take pictures and you get off and on it and stuff. So there's a lot of different ways that you can spend money on a trip, but these are probably the major reasons people spend money. And don't forget to think about the local currency exchange because, you know, if you're going somewhere like Europe or England, you're going to need more money. If you're going to some place like Vietnam or Thailand or something, it might be okay. You might need not as much money because of the exchange rate. So take your credit cards, let the credit card do the exchange rate, or, you know, cash is almost always good everywhere. And be safe with your money. Don't show people how much money you have and stuff like that. It's not good. Keep it in your pocket. All right, so I hope you guys have learned a lot today, and I want you guys to think about what we thought about last time. Last time you thought about a trip that you might want to go on. So this time I want you to think about the transportation, the accommodation, the food, any kind of other expenses that you think you could have when taking that trip that we talked about last time, right? So last time you thought about a place you might like to go, why, and all that kind of stuff. This time I want you to think about how much it could cost you to go there. All right? And write all that down. Share it with your classmates. All right, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.